The diplomatic reception hall on Station Vex 9 gleamed under artificial lighting, casting long shadows across polished floors that reflected 100 different species. I adjusted my sensory stalks, trying to process the overwhelming mixture of pheromones, languages, and political posturing that filled the air like thick smoke. My name is Quillix, and I serve as the junior security analyst for the Galactic Consensus. Tonight I had one job: catalog threats. Simple, right? Wrong. The Krell ambassador stood near the refreshment station, his 4 arms gesturing wildly as he negotiated trade routes with a silicate delegate. Standard stuff. The Vryn military attaché loomed in the corner, her scales reflecting threat displays that made lesser species nervous. Expected. The hegemony representatives clustered together like paranoid insects, which, honestly, they were. Then there were the humans. 3 of them had been invited to this little gathering, and I'd spent the last 2 hours watching them with growing confusion. The first was Ambassador Marcus Reeve, tall, silver-haired, commanding. He worked the room like a professional, shaking appendages, sharing drinks, laughing at jokes that probably weren't funny. Textbook diplomat. The second was Commander Victoria Cross, their military representative. She wore her uniform like armor, stood with perfect posture, and radiated the kind of controlled aggression that screamed, "I could kill you 17 different ways, but I have manners." Also textbook. The third was the problem. Her name was Dr. Eliza Marsh, according to my datapad. Xenobiologist. Apparently, she looked soft, average height for a human, maybe. Brown hair pulled back in something they called a ponytail. Glasses, which seemed ridiculous given human medical technology. She wore a simple gray suit that somehow managed to be both professional and completely forgettable. She'd been standing near the observation window for the past 40 minutes, occasionally sipping something amber-colored from a crystal glass, seemingly lost in thought. Nobody approached her. Nobody noticed her. She was background noise, visual static, the kind of presence your brain just filtered out, which is exactly why my secondary nervous system wouldn't stop screaming warnings at me. Quillix. My supervisor, Terax, loomed over me with his typical impatience. Status report. Any security concerns? Sir, I gestured toward the humans. Something feels off. Terax followed my gaze, his optical clusters narrowing. The humans, please. They're practically harmless. Sure, they survived their death world, but look at them. Diplomat, soldier, scientist, standard configuration. The Krell could snap any of them in half. Yes, sir, but nothing. Focus on real threats. The Vryn delegation has been making aggressive pheromone signals toward the silicates all evening. That's your concern. Not some bookish human female staring at stars. He moved away, leaving me with my doubts and my increasingly agitated sensory organs. Here's the thing about working security in a galaxy full of apex predators. You learn to read the room, not just the obvious threats, the ones who want you to see them coming, but the subtle ones, the patient ones, the ones who understand that true power doesn't announce itself with roars and displays. It understands silence. Dr. Marsh hadn't moved in 43 minutes. She'd taken exactly 4 sips of her drink. Her eyes tracked every reflection in the observation window, processing angles, distances, positions. She wasn't staring at stars. She was using the window as a mirror, monitoring the entire room without appearing to look at anyone. That's when the first incident happened. The Krell ambassador's voice suddenly rose above the ambient noise. Unacceptable. Your species has no concept of proper compensation protocols. The silicate delegate vibrated with fury, her crystalline structure resonating at frequencies that set my teeth on edge. Your assessment is based on fraudulent data. We have evidence. Evidence? From a species that can't even— Excuse me. Dr. Marsh's voice cut through the argument like a scalpel through flesh. Quiet, calm, terrifying in its gentleness. Everyone turned. The Krell ambassador glared down at her, his mass easily 3 times hers. This is not your concern, human. She smiled. Not a friendly smile. Not even a professional smile. A smile that somehow conveyed that she'd already calculated 16 different outcomes to this conversation, and was mildly amused that he thought he had any control over which one would occur. Ambassador Krell, you're arguing about the transport fees for medical supplies to the Outer Rim territories, correct? She didn't wait for confirmation. The silicate delegation is operating under the assumption that your species' metabolic requirements inflate transport costs by approximately 47%. Your counter-argument is based on historical precedent from the Vexan Accords. The Krell's mandibles worked silently. How could you possibly— The problem, Dr. Marsh continued, her tone still pleasant, still quiet, is that neither of you has factored in the recent gravity well fluctuations in Sector 7. They've created a natural acceleration corridor that reduces fuel consumption by 62% if you adjust your trajectory by 0.03 degrees, which means the actual fair price is somewhere between your positions. Shall I calculate the exact figure, or would you prefer to continue posturing? Silence. Complete, absolute silence. The silicate delegate's internal structures shifted. Processing. The gravity fluctuations. We hadn't received updated astronomical data. I know, Dr. Marsh said. Your science division is understaffed. You lost 3 researchers in the recent solar flare incident near Proxima Station. My condolences, by the way. Brilliant minds. All of them. The silicate's entire demeanor changed. Grief flickered across her features. You knew them. Attended a symposium with Dr. Silas 2 years ago. We discussed crystalline information storage for 14 hours straight. She was patient with my rudimentary understanding of your biology. I learned a great deal. Just like that, the tension evaporated. The Krell ambassador, looking slightly off balance, muttered something about reviewing the data. The silicate delegate inclined her head toward Dr. Marsh with unmistakable respect. And Dr. Marsh? She simply returned to her spot by the window, took another small sip of her drink, and resumed her not watching but definitely watching stance. Did you see that? I whispered urgently into my communicator. Terax's voice crackled back, bored. See what? A human nerd spouted some numbers. So what, sir? She just prevented a potential diplomatic incident that could have collapsed the entire medical supply chain for 3 sectors. She knew confidential transport data, astronomical updates that haven't been widely distributed, and personal information about deceased researchers from a species most humans can't even pronounce correctly. Quillix. You're paranoid. She's a scientist. Scientists know things. That's literally their job. But I kept watching, because something Terex said had triggered a realization in my pattern recognition processors. Scientists know things. Sure. But Dr. Marsh didn't just know things. She knew the right things. At the right time, with the right emotional inflection. That required more than intelligence. It required preparation, planning, strategy. 47 minutes later, the second incident occurred. The Vryn military attaché, who'd been growing increasingly agitated throughout the evening, suddenly moved with purpose toward the refreshment station, where Commander Cross stood, her back temporarily turned. I saw it. The subtle shift in stance. The way the Vryn's third arm moved toward a concealed location in her uniform. The slight tensing of combat-ready muscles. This was bad. The Vryn and humans had history. Violent history. If she attacked a human military officer at a diplomatic function, Dr. Marsh moved. Not dramatically. Not obviously. She simply stepped sideways, stumbled slightly, and her drink splashed directly onto the Vryn's feet. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Dr. Marsh sounded mortified, flustered, clumsy. I'm such a disaster with these heels. Are you all right? Did I ruin your uniform? Let me. She dropped to her knees, dabbing at the Vryn's feet with a napkin, talking rapidly, apologizing profusely. Looking every bit the awkward, socially inept academic who couldn't navigate a simple cocktail party without causing a scene. But I saw her eyes. For just a fraction of a second. As she knelt there, her eyes met the Vryn's, and whatever the Vryn saw in that gaze made her freeze completely. The Vryn's third arm slowly, very slowly moved away from her concealed weapon. It is acceptable, she managed. An accident. You're too kind, Dr. Marsh chirped, standing up and brushing herself off. I really should stick to laboratories. I'm useless at these social things. The Vryn walked away. Quickly, her threat displays completely suppressed. Commander Cross turned around, completely unaware that she'd been seconds away from an interstellar incident. The sent back to her window. Back to her quiet observation. Terax. I was nearly vibrating with urgency now. The Vryn just— I saw a human spill a drink. Quillix, if you can't handle basic reception security, I'll find someone who can. Nobody else had seen it. Nobody else had understood what just happened, because everyone was watching the obvious threats. The diplomat making deals, the soldier standing at attention, the Krell with his size, the Vryn with her scales. Nobody was watching the unremarkable woman by the window. Nobody except me. I pulled up Dr. Marsh's file on my datapad, really reading it this time. Xenobiologist. Yes. Published extensively on interspecies communication, conflict resolution, behavioral psychology, consultant for human diplomatic corps, frequently requested for sensitive negotiations. Then I found the gap, 14 years early in her career, where her file just said government research. Nothing else. No details. No publications. Just blank space. Humans didn't leave blank spaces in files without reason. The evening continued. Conversations flowed. Deals were made, hands and appendages shaken, the usual diplomatic theater, and through it all, Dr. Eliza Marsh remained at her window, sipping her drink, seemingly lost in thought. But I kept count. She'd prevented 2 major incidents. She'd gathered intelligence on at least 17 different conversations without moving from her spot. She'd memorized every face, every name, every political position in the room, and she'd done it all while making absolutely certain that nobody except one paranoid security analyst actually noticed her doing any of it. As the reception began winding down, Ambassador Reeve approached her. They spoke briefly, too quietly for my sensors to pick up, but I saw her nod, saw her smile, that same not quite smile, saw her hand him a small data chip that appeared from nowhere. Then she set down her glass, exactly 3/4 empty, and walked toward the exit. She passed within 2 meters of me. Our eyes met for just a second, and she winked. Not threatening, not mocking, just acknowledging, as if to say, yes, you figured it out. Good for you, now keep it to yourself. Then she was gone. I stood there, my sensory stalks practically tingling with adrenaline, and realized something terrifying. The deadliest human in that room hadn't been the military commander with her weapons and training, hadn't been the ambassador with his political power. It had been the one nobody noticed. The one who made you think she was harmless right up until the moment you realized she'd already won. 3 days after the reception, I still couldn't sleep properly. My rest cycle kept getting interrupted by flashes of memory. Dr. Marsh's eyes meeting mine, that knowing wink, the way she'd moved through that room like a ghost that occasionally chose to be solid. I'd filed my report, of course. Terax had dismissed it with his usual condescension. Quillix sees conspiracy and coincidence, he'd muttered, probably thinking I couldn't hear him. The human female did nothing actionable. Case closed. But the thing about paranoia, sometimes it keeps you alive. I was reviewing security footage from the reception for the 14th time when my console pinged with an urgent message. Classified. Eyes only. From Director Voss himself, head of station security. My sensory stalks went rigid. Director Voss never contacted junior analysts directly. Never. The message was brief. Conference room 7. Now. Come alone. Tell no one. Yeah. Not ominous at all. Conference room 7 was located in the secure wing, the kind of place where conversations happened that never made it into official records. I passed through 3 security checkpoints, each one making me more nervous than the last. Director Voss waited inside, his 6 eyes tracking my entrance with unsettling focus. He was a Meridian, which meant he'd evolved from ambush predators and still had the instincts to prove it. Next to him sat 2 figures I definitely hadn't expected to see. Ambassador Marcus Reeve and Dr. Eliza Marsh. Analyst Quillix. Director Voss gestured to a seat. Please sit. We have a situation. I sat, mostly because my legs had stopped working properly. Dr. Marsh looked exactly as unremarkable as she had at the reception. Same simple clothing, same glasses, same forgettable appearance. Except now, in this small room without crowds to blend into, I could see what I'd missed before. The way she sat, perfectly still but ready to move in any direction. The way her eyes processed everything, constantly calculating. The way the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees just from her presence. Analyst Quillix. Ambassador Reeve began, his tone diplomatic but serious. You're here because you're one of 3 beings on this entire station who noticed something unusual at the reception 3 days ago. 3? I managed. You, Director Voss, and myself, Reeve confirmed. Everyone else saw exactly what they expected to see. which frankly is what we counted on. The Dr. Marsh smiled faintly. You have good instincts, analyst. Better than most. That's why you're here. Here for what? Exactly. Director Voss leaned forward, his expression grim. Tell me, Quillix, what do you know about the Carthax Syndicate? My blood went cold. Everyone knew about the Carthax. They were the galaxy's most sophisticated criminal organization, operating across 70 systems, dealing in everything from weapons to information to political manipulation. They'd toppled governments, orchestrated wars, and somehow always stayed 3 steps ahead of law enforcement. I know they're dangerous, I said carefully, and that nobody's ever managed to infiltrate their leadership structure. Correct, Voss said. Until 6 months ago, when human intelligence managed something remarkable. They identified a Carthax cell operating here, on Station Vex 9, preparing to assassinate key members of the Galactic Consensus during this week's summit meetings. My sensory organs went haywire. This week, as in right now, the reception was Phase 1, Dr. Marsh said quietly, her voice still maintaining that same gentle, almost academic tone. The Carthax had operatives positioned throughout the event. The Vryn military attaché who approached Commander Cross. She was compromised. Blackmail. From what we've determined. Her family held hostage. She was supposed to kill the commander, trigger a human-Vryn conflict, and in the chaos 3 other assassinations would occur. But you stopped her, I said. The drink, that wasn't an accident. No, Dr. Marsh confirmed. It wasn't. The Krell ambassador and the Silicate delegate, their argument was being orchestrated by Carthax agitators in both delegations, designed to escalate into violence. They gave them an off-ramp, and the data chip you gave Ambassador Reeve. Her smile widened slightly. Someone really was paying attention, that contained the complete network map of the Carthax cell, 37 operatives, their communication protocols, their financial networks, everything we needed. I looked between them. What exactly is your role, Dr. Marsh? Reeve and Voss exchanged glances. Finally, the ambassador spoke. Dr. Marsh is indeed a xenobiologist, one of humanity's finest in fact. But for 14 years before returning to academic work she served in a rather specialized capacity for Earth's intelligence services. The gap in her file, I murmured. Indeed, Dr. Marsh said. I was what humans call a sleeper agent coordinator. I trained field operatives, designed infiltration protocols, and occasionally did field work when situations required someone who could, as you so astutely observed, avoid being noticed. Director Voss activated a holographic display. Images filled the air, surveillance footage from dozens of locations across the station. Over the past 3 days, Dr. Marsh has helped us identify and neutralize 17 Carthax operatives. We've prevented 4 assassination attempts. We've uncovered corruption in 3 major delegations. And we've done it all quietly, without causing panic or destabilizing the summit. All because of her, I said, looking at the unremarkable woman who just casually admitted to being one of the most dangerous intelligence operatives in the galaxy. All because, Dr. Marsh corrected gently, people consistently underestimate what they don't notice. Your species, Analyst Quillix, evolved from herd prey animals. You're programmed to watch for obvious threats. Size, teeth, aggressive displays. My species evolved as persistence hunters. We learned patience, strategy, the ability to appear harmless right up until we're not. She stood, walked to the holographic display, and manipulated it with practiced ease. New images appeared, faces, locations, networks. The problem, she continued, is that we haven't gotten all of them. The Carthax leadership knows we've compromised their operation. They're going to make one final attempt during tomorrow's closing summit. Something big, something desperate. What kind of attempt? I asked. That's what we need to figure out, Voss said. We've intercepted fragmentary communications, code words, movement patterns, but we can't identify the target or the method. Dr. Marsh turned to face me directly. Which is where you come in. Analyst Quillix. You see things others miss. You question assumptions. Right now we need someone who thinks like you think. You want me to help catch terrorists? We want you to help us understand them. Ambassador Reeve clarified. You're not a field agent. You're an analyst. So analyze. They gave me access to everything. Surveillance footage, intercepted communications, movement logs, financial transactions. It was overwhelming. a tsunami of data that would take weeks to properly process. But then I remembered something Dr. Marsh had done at the reception. She hadn't tried to watch everything. She'd used the window as a mirror, focused on reflections, on indirect observation. So I stopped looking at what the data was showing me, and started looking at what it was hiding. There, buried in routine maintenance schedules, I found it, a pattern. Small adjustments to the environmental systems in Conference Hall Alpha, where tomorrow's closing session would occur. Nothing dramatic, just minor temperature fluctuations, humidity changes, air pressure adjustments. Individually, meaningless. Together, they created perfect conditions for a specific type of chemical weapon, one that required precise environmental factors to achieve lethal dispersal. Here, I said, highlighting the pattern. They're going to gas the entire leadership during the closing ceremonies. Dr. Marsh leaned in, studying my work. For several long moments, she said nothing. Then she smiled, not the professional smile, not the dangerous smile, a genuine one. Excellent work, analyst. Truly excellent. She turned to Voss. Can we adjust the environmental systems without alerting them? Easily, Voss confirmed. Make their weapon inert? No, Dr. Marsh said, and suddenly her voice carried an edge I hadn't heard before. Cold, calculating. We let them deploy it, but we modify the environmental conditions so it creates a harmless but visible aerosol dispersion. We'll catch them in the act, identify any operatives we've missed, and have ironclad evidence for prosecution. That's risky, Reeve cautioned. If our calculations are off. They won't be, Dr. Marsh said with absolute confidence. I've done this before, trust me. And somehow, despite everything, I did trust her, because I'd seen her work. I'd seen how she thought, how she planned, how she operated 15 moves ahead while making everyone think she was barely keeping up with the current one. The next day, Conference Hall Alpha filled with the galaxy's most powerful beings. Ambassadors, ministers, military commanders, corporate leaders, all gathered for the closing session of the summit. I watched from the security station, my heart's pounding so hard I thought they might crack my carapace. Dr. Marsh was there, of course. Back to being forgettable, sitting in the observer section with a datapad, looking every bit the academic, taking notes. The session began. Speeches were made. Agreements signed. Everything proceeding exactly as planned. Then, 37 minutes in, I saw it. A silicate delegate, one we hadn't flagged, made a subtle gesture. Environmental vents shifted slightly. A faint mist began dispersing through the air. The Carthax weapon. Except the mist was bright purple instead of invisible. And instead of inducing respiratory failure, it just smelled faintly of lavender. Confusion rippled through the hall. Security teams moved immediately, sealing exits. The silicate delegate tried to run, along with 6 others we hadn't previously identified as Carthax operatives. They didn't make it far, because Commander Cross and her team, positioned strategically throughout the hall, were already moving. Within 90 seconds, all 7 were in custody. Dr. Marsh remained seated, still taking notes, completely unnoticed by everyone except me. The summit continued after a brief recess. The attacks were spun as an unfortunate security incident, swiftly resolved. No panic, no destabilization, just quiet, efficient resolution, exactly as she'd planned. Later that evening I found Dr. Marsh in the observation lounge, once again standing by a window, once again watching reflections instead of stars. You're leaving tomorrow, I said. Not a question. Yes, she confirmed. My work here is done. Time to return to being a boring academic who studies alien microorganisms and publishes tedious papers. Will you ever tell people what you really do? She considered this. No, because the moment people know to look for me, I become useless. My entire value is in being underestimated, in being the person nobody worries about. Doesn't that bother you? Never getting recognition? But Dr. Marsh turned to look at me, and for the first time I saw something vulnerable in her expression. Sometimes. But then I remember that recognition means ego, and ego means mistakes, and mistakes mean people die, so I choose to be invisible. I choose to be the one nobody notices, because that's how I save lives. She handed me something. A small data chip. Your analysis was brilliant, Quillix. This contains a recommendation I've filed with both Human Intelligence Services and the Galactic Consensus. You have rare talents. How you use them is up to you. What kind of talents? The ability to see what others miss, to question assumptions, to understand that the deadliest threats aren't always the ones making the most noise. She smiled. You'd make an excellent analyst, or if you're interested, an excellent field operative. Me. But I'm not dangerous. Neither am I, Dr. Marsh said with a laugh. That's the whole point. Dangerous is obvious. Obvious is predictable. Predictable is defeatable. But someone who appears harmless, someone nobody notices, someone who can move through a room full of predators and make them all think you're prey. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. That's the most dangerous thing in the galaxy, Analyst Quillix, and you have the potential to be exactly that. Then she was gone, disappearing into the flow of station traffic, becoming just another forgettable face in an endless sea of beings. But I stood there, holding that data chip, and realized something profound. She was right. The deadliest human in any room would always be the one nobody noticed, not because they were weak, but because they understood that true power didn't announce itself. True power waited, watched, prepared, and struck only when victory was already assured. I looked at my reflection in the observation window, seeing myself differently now, not as a paranoid junior analyst, but as someone who might, just might, have the potential to become something more, something nobody would see coming. After all, I'd learned from the best, and as Dr. Eliza Marsh had proven beyond any doubt, sometimes the most dangerous predator in the room is the one who makes you think they're not even there. The end.
If you enjoyed the stories like this, you are watching Sci-Fi HFY channel. For more interesting and engaging stories like this, please stay tuned to my channel.